Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Thursday night, July the 19th. Thanks for hanging out, July the 18th. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Primetime program. New information emerges on a critical Titans roster decision. That critical roster decision that the Tennessee Titans made was on Derrick Henry and the idea to not trade him, even though they had a deal in place, according to reports, with the Baltimore Ravens. We'll share that new information with you. If you have not heard it, we talked about it briefly on the radio show today, but it's worth diving into in a little more detail tonight. Then we'll ask you to pick one. Would you rather have had the feel-good of Derrick Henry's last win in a Titans uniform against the Jags, or the potential draft compensation that the Ravens were prepared to give up for Derrick Henry at the trade deadline? We will wrap up with a weekend bounce back, because that's what we do at the end of our primetime week. And before we can end the primetime week, we have to do the last show. Before we can do the last show, you guys need to share this show around on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Wherever you want to hang out with us. Bork says Buck likes making these antagonizing graphics. No, that's not me, as a matter of fact. That is Bert's department. So if you feel antagonized, you can take it up with the shirtless ginger existing in the background. We will dive into all of these things together, but like I said, share the program around on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch, wherever you are spending your time here with us. If you're on Twitter, please retweet the show. It's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you're on Facebook Live, you can share now to public. That's in the bottom left. YouTube or Twitch, where I see so many of you, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video while you're there, and we can certainly get into it together. We have a lot of ground to cover and a little bit of time to do so. Let's go ahead and get the primetime show up and rolling. Welcome into A to Z Sports Primetime from the Zen Sports Studios. I'm your host, Buck Rising. I'm proud, as always, to be presented to you by the wonderful people at the aforementioned Zen Sports. Download the app, plug in the promo code ATOZTN, get up to $100 on your no-danger first wager, where betting just gets better in the Zen Sports app. Of course, you know that the South's most trusted Ford dealer is Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet. Quality American-made Ford vehicles and award-winning customer service is what they offer. Go to Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet for more information, or online at tworiversford.com. And TrueMath Fitness, your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident. No workout ever recycled or repeated. The best in the business is TrueMathFitness.com, where, as I mentioned, that first workout is free. So new information on Derrick Henry and his status that was almost traded in the middle of the season at the deadline by Ran Carthon and the Tennessee Titans. This is a pretty interesting subject, because you'll remember, I think most of you will remember, that around the trade deadline, I started to hear very, very loudly the team that was most interested in Derrick Henry's services, with real compensation on the line, though at the time we did not know the compensation that was being offered, was the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about it a lot, and we talked about the viability of it. And at the time, we discussed whether you guys would be comfortable parting ways with Derrick Henry mid-season in an expiring contract situation to get something back for one of the best players on the football team, and also to allow Derrick to compete for a, obviously in the last season, a better football team in the Baltimore Ravens to compete for a Super Bowl. Ultimately, they did not decide to trade Henry, but it sounded like Ran Carthon's preference was to move. It doesn't sound like it's being reported that Ran Carthon's preference was to move Derrick Henry, and that the deal got nixed. So we'll give you those details right after we ask you your Two Rivers Ford take in the comment section on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. Should the Titans have traded Derrick Henry at last year's deadline? That is the discussion, because that is what their intention was, or at least that was Ran Carthon's intention, until such time as the deal was vetoed. So this profile of Derrick Henry online at The Athletic, they cover a lot. It's about Derrick Henry's acquisition, or the acquisition of Derrick Henry by the Baltimore Ravens, and what the future portends for a guy that still has a lot of tread on the tires, even though he's a running back on the other side of 30, which is usually a career death sentence for these guys. And it starts with the profile, because of course you have to start with the profile for the place that Derrick Henry has been his last 8 years, with the Tennessee Titans. And it dives into some details specifically from last season, most specifically about the Baltimore Ravens' interest in Derrick Henry, which we discussed last October while Derrick was in the final year of his Titans contract. Rumblings were that he would like to play for the Ravens. Not only that the Ravens were interested in him, but that Derrick was interested in Baltimore. Now, some context for that. Derrick Henry, there were rumors around Derrick Henry as early as not this past combine, but the combine previous, where we were up in Indianapolis. As always is the case, there are rumors. The rumor mill really gets kick-started in full swing at Indianapolis at the combine, because the entirety of the league, agents, players, coaches, well, future players, coaches, media, were all together in the same bars and the same restaurants and the same convention center for the better part of a week to 10 days. So, of course, discussions, whether you consider it tampering, whether you consider it due diligence, whatever the case may be, in the 2023 combine, there was a lot of rumblings around not only Derrick Henry being traded, but the Titans actively shopping Derrick Henry. Now, those reports were shut down by Ran Carthon at a press conference, one of his first press conferences, because you'll remember Ran Carthon's first year on the job was the 2023 season. That was his first NFL combine running the show, or at least running the show to the extent that he was able to, given the whole Mike Vrabel situation, which we have discussed ad nauseum. So 2023 combine, those discussions start. My understanding of the Derrick Henry situation was Derrick was prepared at that point, once that started back in February, the same way that Kevin Byard was kind of at peace with the idea of being traded and ultimately was traded, that Derrick Henry was at peace with the idea of being moved from the Titans, whether it was at the trade deadline or at the end of the season, that he had accomplished everything that he could possibly accomplish during his time here. Whether you think the Titans failed Derrick Henry at the end of his career here could be discussed, given the way that the personnel around him fell to shit. And we all know the result of the 2022 and 2023 seasons after that. And so with Derrick Henry, the focus becomes, okay, long-term viability, where can I win a ring? And the idea of Baltimore doesn't sound too bad at all. So Derrick Henry was prepared to be moved, and Derrick Henry was at peace with being moved as early as the start of last offseason program. And then once it started up again around the trade deadline, because I'd heard from a handful of people, and specifically the economy around Derrick Henry, that their entire operation was getting ready to move, because it is an entire operation around Derrick Henry. For example, I don't know how many of you saw that Derrick Henry spends on average $240,000 a year on his physical wellness and recovery. That is an entire economy, entire team that's required to do that, right? So that whole situation was getting ready to be picked up, planning to live in Baltimore for the rest of the season, on top of everything else that's associated with Derrick, right? Personal chefs, strength and conditioning, all these kind of things that when you're that kind of a star athlete, you have circulating around you, and you have people's jobs and livelihoods tied directly to you as an individual. So they ultimately get a deal agreed to in terms, they agreed to a deal with the Baltimore Ravens. And this is the first time we've heard compensation around a potential Derrick Henry trade at last year's deadline. Here is the line from Dan Pompei of The Athletic, who writes in this Henry profile: Eric DeCosta, I add parenthetically, Ravens GM, agreed to the framework of a trade with Tennessee general manager Ran Carthon, a fourth-round pick that could have become a third had Henry reached certain production levels. However, others in the Titans hierarchy apparently were not on board with the deal, so Henry played out the season in Nashville. So ultimately, Ran had a deal agreed to, and they weren't able to get it done because other people in Titans organization, and you can speculate about who those people might be. I have a pretty good idea of who those people might be, and it's not, for those of you saying that Vrabel nixed the trade, Mike wanted Derrick here, but I promise you, Mike wasn't the only one who wanted Derrick here for different reasons that we can expand on. But I think that the situation for Derrick is a pretty interesting one because I think a lot of Titans fans hear a fourth that could have become a third and said, what the hell? You didn't trade Derrick Henry, a 30-year-old running back, for a potential third-round pick in that situation. This is the thing that really stands out to you because, of course, you would take that deal. We were talking about the idea of Derrick Henry being traded for a day 3 pick of little consequence, right? If you were able to get a fourth for Derrick Henry, I think you should have done the deal. If you were able to get a fifth for Derrick Henry or a future third and some 2024 draft compensation, I think those things could have been discussed or debated. But a fourth that could have become a third based on production, given that Derrick was still able to produce behind one of the shittiest, if not the shittiest offensive line in professional football last year, that is pretty crazy to think about. The option, says MB, should have been to become a first or second, depending upon what the milestones were. I just don't think any such deal would have existed. And I think that a fourth that would have turned to a third would have been the thing that you take. Hello, ladies on YouTube says, y'all are some turncoats. Henry is the best Titan ever. Well, he's not the best Titan ever. Eddie George is statistically still superior to Derrick Henry in the all-time franchise leading rusher category. There are some places where Derrick is the record holder for the Titans and the franchise all-time touchdowns, right? Derrick Henry is a spectacular player, and I'm not here to denigrate Derrick Henry's time with the Tennessee Titans, but to say that Henry is the best Titan ever ignores the person who is, still ahead of him on the list because Eddie George was able to play for a longer period of time here. A lot of people are guessing who canned the deal, saying Amy. Now you remember, and I believe it was, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it was Kaharski that reported that the Titans organization did not veto a potential deal for Derrick Henry at the time. You guys are saying that my screen is zoomed in way too far and you can't see anything. I think some of you guys are having issues there because my screen looks perfectly fine on my end. I'm not sure what it looks like on your end. I'll see if Bert notices anything on the live stream YouTube broadcast or Facebook, and he'll be able to inform me from there. But point being, right, Derrick Henry is a Titans legend, and not just the way that I joke around with like Titans legend Andre Johnson or Titans legend Julio Jones, right? Derrick Henry truly and honestly is a Titans legend. And so, Chosen says it's happening on Facebook. I saw it. So it is a Facebook issue. It's not an issue on our end. I can't do anything about Facebook's settings. So if you're having issues on Facebook, feel free to go to YouTube. But we'll continue to do the broadcast from here. I think that when you talk about the issues that Derrick Henry, that allowing Derrick Henry to walk for nothing, it was a problem for some Titans fans at the time. And once a deal was ultimately not agreed upon, or once a deal was ultimately not executed, it was agreed upon, but not executed, the Titans rolled out the season with Derrick Henry. The season went the way that the season did. They missed the playoffs. They were a 6-win football team, and they did get a win at the end of the year. But should the Titans have traded Derrick Henry at the trade deadline? Here are the two talking points, right? It's your Two Rivers Ford take. As always, it's presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer, quality American-made Ford vehicles, and award-winning customer service. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com for more information. The Two Rivers Ford take is this: should the Titans have traded Derrick Henry at the deadline, especially now knowing what the compensation that was agreed upon was, a fourth that could have become a third based on production. So with Derrick Henry, I think the answer, you could pick either one and make a good case. If you didn't want to trade Derrick Henry last year, I would completely understand it. It's selfish. It's selfish of the people who didn't want to trade Derrick Henry, because from a fan standpoint, you want to see Derrick Henry for as long as Derrick Henry continues to wear your uniform, right? A lot of you won't care about a meaningless regular season finale against the Jacksonville Jaguars other than beating the Jags, kept them out of the postseason, which is a nice feather in your cap in a season that was otherwise meaningless. The second part of that is it's a selfish business decision by the organization, because what does Derrick Henry help do? Sell tickets. Why on earth would anybody show up to watch the end of the Tennessee Titans season for reasons not named Will Levis or Derrick Henry. Levis is a decent one, but you'll remember that Levis wasn't playing at the end of the year because the offensive line that he played behind got him hurt not once but twice. So it's Tannehill in the season finale, and I know that October there were many, many more games to play after that. But Tannehill and Derrick Henry in a game against the Jags, Tannehill, Henry, and Vrabel in their final home game against the Jags as a unit, together with the old regime of the Titans that has since been swept out, including all three of those people. It's a selfish business decision by the organization because you want to still find ways to generate revenue. Derrick Henry is a revenue generator. He is one of not that many kind of stars in the NFL that have that legitimate star power. The Titans had one, right? He has been the most marketable Tennessee Titan that I can remember at any point in their existence, save Eddie George, who continues to be the person most associated with the Tennessee Titans outside of Steve McNair, who has long since passed on. I think we're 15 years, as a matter of fact, this July 4th removed from the passing of the tragic loss of Steve McNair in that murder-suicide situation. So with Derrick Henry, though, it is a business decision to keep him because you can still sell tickets off Derrick Henry's back, right? And I don't blame the organization for doing that in a season that's absolutely lost. The other side of it is, yes, you absolutely should have traded Derrick Henry because draft compensation for a player that's getting ready to walk for nothing at the end of the season is better than letting a player walk out of his contract at the end of the season just to sign with the team that wanted him anyway. So I think that was really something that had to be mulled over and probably eats at Rand Carthon a little bit because they have used third and fourth round picks as a means of generating legitimate roster talent. Will Levis was a part of a trade that included a third round pick, right? The Cardinals got the Titans' third round pick this draft for the Will Levis deal. The L'Jarius Sneed trade included a fourth round pick, a future fourth that Rand Carthon was able to utilize to acquire one of the top corners in the NFL. So these draft picks have meaning beyond just drafting an actual player. But for the situation with Derrick Henry, you understood why there might be mixed emotions in the Titans building, and obviously were why the deal ultimately didn't get done. So I would have traded him if that was the compensation. I understand why people in the organization didn't want to do it, but the Derrick Henry trade at the time was one of the tougher ones to kind of justify not doing because of the way that we just articulated how much those draft assets, or that draft asset specifically, could have benefited this team in trying to get back on its feet.
Perfect way to go out with a win and 153 yards?
No, I was just saying in the moment, though. It's been a great 8 years. I've grown. A lot has happened through these 8 years. Turned 30 in year 8, and had my daughter through these 8 years, and I've just grown as a person and a player. Had some great teammates, great coaches. The fans have been there through it all. So it was just a thank you to them. I know how I worded it probably got brought out with question a little bit. It was just a thank you speech, just showing up to the fans.
Was that a spur of the moment deal? Did you thought about doing that, and how do you think it went off?
Well, they just told me after the game they want me to say something one more time. So it was just from the heart and off the top, kind of freestyle a little bit. Hope I did good. Hope y'all liked it.
So that's the final introduction at Nissan Stadium of Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry before the Jags game. That's Derrick Henry's last run up the tunnel after a win, and Derrick Henry's final press conference as a Tennessee Titan. He knew that it was over, and we all knew that it was over, but the idea that it should have been over, that it probably was over, or rather that it should have been over at the trade deadline, is the thing that made the most sense. Should the Titans have traded Derrick Henry to the Ravens last year? Absolutely, they should have. But I get, from a football standpoint, absolutely they should have. But from a business perspective, I understand why a group of people who are associated with generating revenue for this football team said, no, let's ride it out. Let's get what we can out of this, because there's only one Derrick Henry, and that's the only reason that people are going to show up to watch our football team in 2023. Let's see. Chosen says he knew that was his last presser as a Titan. Yes, obviously. Be French said, I'm glad my son and I got to see his last game at Nissan Stadium. However, the new prices, it might be my last game for a while. Let's see. Some other comments. Henry runs for 1,800 yards this year, and the Ravens brag that they got him for a fourth. Forget it. Give him to the Chiefs for $1 then. Talking about Derrick Henry. So I don't understand. They would have had to extend Derrick Henry anyway. I'm not quite sure your point there. If they would have traded for Derrick Henry last year, they could have won a Super Bowl with Derrick. I mean, remember famously the AFC Championship game. What was the biggest reason that's being blamed for the Ravens losing? They got away from running the football. You don't have, 8 combined carries or something ridiculous like that, or like 13 combined carries between Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards if Derrick Henry's on your roster hosting the Kansas City Chiefs in Baltimore last year. So they would have had to extend him if they wanted to keep him beyond last season, because they could have had him for a 4th-round pick on an expiring contract. So I'm not quite sure I understand the point that you're trying to make there. I'm keeping all my Henry and Brown cards, says Akai on YouTube. Let's see. Bork says we'll go down as one of those what if stories with how good the Ravens were last year. Absolutely. I think it is. I think it's pretty crazy to think about in that way, because I believe that the Baltimore Ravens would have won the Super Bowl if Derrick Henry was on their roster last year. Eric Alonso says Ravens wideouts are going to hate blocking for Prince. Why? They already blocked for Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards. That's a ridiculous comment. It's a run-based offense. What kind of dumb shit is that? Have you not watched the Baltimore Ravens play professional football? Of course they're going to love blocking for Derrick Henry, because they've been blocking for a bunch of slaps and still winning. Anyway, that's complete and total nonsense. So some of you guys are still Facebook's having issues tonight. There's nothing that we can do about it on our end. If you're having issues on Facebook, I'd invite you to watch the YouTube broadcast, because that is the situation. Eric Alonso counters it with lies, which is, of course, just nothing, because he has nothing to contribute to the conversation of actual substance, rather than ignoring the fact that they're already playing in a run-blocking system that allows the amount of explosive plays that Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell, and whoever else was playing running back for the Baltimore Ravens last year to have. It's just completely ridiculous. I think that there is a lot. People are still debating the difference between Eddie George's greatness and Derrick Henry's greatness. I don't give a shit about that. We can do another, Mount Rushmore running back conversation another day of actual consequence. But right now, the discussion is: would you rather have had the memories of that last Jags game for Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, and Mike Vrabel, or would you have rather them done the deal? That's the question that I'm asking. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. The primetime program is made possible by Zen Sports. Download the app, plug in the promo code ATOZTN, get up to $100 on your no danger first wager. Terms and conditions do apply. Must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line 1-800-889-9789 at Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN. So I think that there is a lot of back and forth that people would have had on this subject matter at the time. Would you rather have the trade itself and the fourth, potentially a 3rd-round pick for Derrick Henry, or do you want the memory that many of you guys will have with your family members, or if you were able to take your kids to a game, or just you personally, if you're a lifelong Titans fan, a lifelong Derrick Henry fan, no matter who he plays for, because you love what he was able to do here for the franchise? Would you rather have the Jags memories of keeping the Jags out of the playoffs with that last ride with those 3 individuals before they were let go or they parted ways for one reason or another, Vrabel, Tannehill, and Henry, or the trade and the draft capital itself. John on YouTube says, done the deal. Vernon says, would have done the deal. William says, would have done the deal. Hate to say it, says Rashid, but would have done the deal. I think that there is a lot of this that's, understandable. It's easy to armchair GM after the fact. And it sounds like the GM would have also, the GM was prepared to do the deal. Somebody else in the organization or a group of people in the organization decided to veto the deal that they agreed upon. But I think ultimately what you have in this, in hindsight, the deal would have been sweet. The deal, it doesn't sound super sexy, a fourth, potentially third for one of the greatest running backs in not just your franchise's history, but in the history of the sport, right? Derrick Henry is an NFL record setter in multiple different ways. To your point, Quentin, the deal was good enough, right? The deal was good enough to do that deal, given that you gain nothing by letting Derrick Henry play out the stretch and walk to the team that wanted to trade for him anyway in the offseason. MB says keeping the Jags out of the playoffs is a silly argument. All we did was put another AFC South team into the playoffs. Ching says, F the capital. It's about the legacy, and the fact that we kept the Jags out sealed the deal. Had it went any other way, I'd have taken the trade, right? It's different because you won, right? But here's the thing. Is Derrick Henry any less of a Titans legend or any more of a Titans legend, let's say? Does that Jags game do anything for the lore of Derrick Henry? It does a little bit, and here's why. Derrick Henry is a Titans legend regardless of what happened at that point, right? But had they lost, and they'd lost the final game en route to a losing season, and then that would have been a 5-12 campaign, and the Jags would have made the playoffs, and everything that would have happened, all the dominoes that would have fallen in place after, if the Jags had won the game, then Derrick Henry's final moments with you guys in the stadium, the goodbye speech that he gave, the press conference with us afterwards, him standing for hours and hours after that game. Hell, when I was leaving the stadium later that night around 5 or 6, Derrick Henry was still out there signing autographs well after the game was done. That is an impactful legacy moment made greater because they won the game, right? Now, is it the most impactful legacy moment in a career full of them in the last 8 years of Derrick Henry? No, it's pretty small. It's pretty minuscule on the list, but it does allow you guys the opportunity to have as close to a good goodbye, right? As opposed to, they lost the game. What a waste of time. What a waste of Derrick Henry, all these things. So I think that they won is the only reason that people are saying, yeah, no, you don't do the trade because Derrick Henry's a Titans legend. You let him finish it out here and you let him, have that moment with the fans afterwards, but only because they won that game. I think is there even a conversation about you don't do the deal? I think you do the deal every time based on the terms that were agreed upon. I think a fourth conditional to a third based on Derrick Henry's production is as good a trade as you were going to get. It was as good a trade as you got. Trade offer for Derrick Henry, and that you should have taken that and run with it. I agree with Rand Carthon's logic at the time. I understand why other people in the organization said, no, keep him here. Let's keep as many people in the seats as humanly possible, and let's try and sell a few more Derrick Henry jerseys while we're at it. Okay, weekend bounce back. Who needs to bounce back most in sports? Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. In the comment section, please provide me with your answers. While you do that, I will remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. Go to GaryAshton.com. Get your dream address without the stress. And remember, don't sell without the intel that you can only get with the official real estate agent of the Nashville Predators. That is GaryAshton.com. All right, the person who needs a bounce back most in sports this week, I'm going to go with a sports media figure. I'm going to go with Paul Feinbaum because Lane Kiffin at SEC Media Days got on the Paul Feinbaum show and roasted my poor guy Paul.
College game day, you had to make your big splash, and they were watching it because I know the other person in the room that was watching it with them and you said what a joke I was, and I'm the Miley Cyrus of college football coaching, and I should be fired. And they looked at each other, and later that night I was fired.
Yeah, by the way.
So, but hey, look what happened. I would have never gotten to work for Coach Saban. All these other things wouldn't happen. So I appreciate you for helping getting me fired. Thank you.
Look at what you're doing today. You're predicted to go to the play. And look at Miley Cyrus. She's had a nice comeback.
So you're wrong on that. I mean, you put me down with that. So really, I don't really know what you're good at. Like you predicted that Coach Saban was done. That didn't happen. You basically said Miley Cyrus stinks, and she's still going.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's always.
Lane Kiffin on the Paul Feinbaum show, thanking Paul for getting him fired from, what was that? That would have been the USC job. And then telling Paul Feinbaum, I really don't know what you're good at because you've been wrong about everything, is crazy on live national television and national radio. As a media member who said a lot of different things about a lot of different coaches and a lot of different players, we don't have a lot of people keeping us accountable, right? So when that accountability does come home to roost in a situation like Lane and Feinbaum, it can feel pretty icky or a little cringy. But I think it's important. I don't like. I mean, it is great television, certainly, and if Paul had to get roasted, better it be on his own platform than Lane doing it on his social media handles and Paul not getting any traffic off of it, right? Because there at least is some silver lining for Paul that he got the clicks, he got the downloads, he got the listens because Lane Kiffin came on the Paul Feinbaum show just to roast Paul. But it is a pretty big bounce back moment for Paul in how he responds to that, because that is a tough scene. And I know that it would be hard for anybody to handle that situation gracefully, and Feinbaum did the best job that I guess he could. But Lane got his ass. There's no doubt about it. It's going to do it for us tonight on the Primetime program. That is the end of the Primetime Show week. We appreciate you as always. Like the video on the way out the door. Austin has just texted me about the Facebook difficulties. Apparently, there must be a change between StreamYard and Facebook, so we're going to explore that for you to make sure that those of you who are watching on Facebook don't have the same zoomed-up view of them tomorrow morning on the morning show as you did of me. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you like the video on the way out the door. Radio show tomorrow, Don Davenport, Coach Dave McGinnis. It'll be a great time. We hope you join us from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. And if not, Sunday night, primetime, the week of training camp, where we'll make Super Bowl predictions, we'll make AFC South predictions, we'll make conference championship predictions. It'll be a great time had by all. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys then.
Go home! Go home! Go home! You're embarrassing Nashville! Go home!